Hello movie barfs and welcome back to the channel. Of all of Ryan Reynolds' movie roles, the one he regrets most is arguably 2011's Green Lantern. Well, X-Men Origins is a close contender too, but at least he was just a side character in that film. In Green Lantern, it's his movie. He's front and center. You know it's bad when even Teen Titans Go made fun of it in their movie. And not to mention Deadpool time traveling back to shoot Ryan Reynolds in the head before he could act out the role. But what makes this movie so badly received? And why has it contributed to the stigma that DC movies aren't as good as Marvel's? In this video, we'll take a look at some of the things that made this movie a weaker entry in the comic book genre. Watch out, we'll be delving into spoilers from here on. Reason 1. Hal Jordan's lack of character growth. As audiences, we love well-written characters. Characters that have an arc, who go on a journey of struggle and self-discovery. Especially when we can resonate with the character's troubles and emotions in some way. This is the typical hero's journey we see as a story structure for books and films. The protagonist faces a challenge, and we as the audience root for the character to overcome that challenge. In Green Lantern, we see that Hal Jordan gets chosen by the Ring after its previous user dies, but we don't see anything in the preceding parts of the film to justify this. Sure, the film was trying to show that he was a fearless pilot with his antics in the Saber flight simulation, but I'd chalk it up to him just being reckless, like how he would drive a car with one hand while using the other to wrap a birthday present. If that was all it took for him to be deemed worthy, surely the Ring could have easily just have chosen someone else instead. It's a good thing Tom Cruise's Top Gun character didn't exist in this universe, as the Ring would have gone to him instead. But okay, I can accept that he just happened to be the coincidental person who received powers. Sometimes lightning strikes certain people at a certain place and time. This happens to characters all the time, like the Flash who was quite literally struck with lightning, or Spider-Man who just happened to be bitten by a radioactive spider, or Thor who was just born with powers because of who he is. So I can accept that they don't need to have a ton of backstory before getting their abilities. But what they do with their powers after that is the issue. With the case of Spider-Man, he learns that with great power comes great responsibility, and that sometimes he has to give up his dreams to do the right thing. With Thor, he learns the value of humility and becomes worthy of the power he once held recklessly. With Shazam, Billy Batson learns to use his abilities beyond his own childish escapades while finding his family at his foster home. In all these cases, there is some growth, some journey of self-discovery that the character undergoes. It's what makes them endearing to us as the audience and makes us root for them. With Hal Jordan in Green Lantern, he doesn't have any of this. He starts off as a cocky, reckless pilot, making crude jokes, and at the end of the film, he's pretty much the same guy. He gets the Ring and mega punches 3 dudes, probably killing them, and then gets transported off to space. Then he gets some training with the rest of the Green Lanterns on Oa, and after getting his ass handed to him, he returns back to Earth where he uses the Ring to save a helicopter with a projected race car. Some more minor stuff happens in space and Earth, and eventually, Hal fights Parallax and defeats him. Pretty easily too, if I might add. Point here is that everything comes pretty easily to Hal, other than the training scene on Oa. The movie is pretty much summed up with Hal getting an alien ring, learning how to use it, and then defeating the evil force in the movie. There isn't any character development on his side, and no personal struggle he has to go through. Part of this is due to the fact that the movie spends so much time on other redundant stuff, like setting up a secondary villain in Hector Hammond that led to nowhere, and too much time on Hal and Carol's relationship. More writing and screen time could have been given to developing Hal and making him a character with a journey that we can resonate with. That aside, the main reason Hal doesn't have much character growth stems from the next point on this list. Reason 2. Hal has no connection with the villains. For most of the movie, the villains are largely non-existent, that is, to Hal. He goes through most of the movie unaware of their existence, and there is hardly any interaction between them and Hal. Sure, he does talk to Hector Hammond for a teeny bit, but that was before he went off the rails. The main villain, if you'd call it, is this mysterious entity of fear known as Parallax. I don't know the full backstory, but suffice to say it's some cosmic force on its way to consume Earth. Very much similar to the cosmic force of Galactus in the Fantastic Four movie, Rise of the Silver Surfer, which was also panned by audiences and critics. It has absolutely no personality and is just there for a CGI fest at the end. There's no interaction between Hal and Parallax until the very end, and because of that, there is hardly any challenge for him for the main bulk of the movie. And without this challenge, the movie becomes dull. So because the main villain is so impersonal and unrelatable, the filmmakers gave us a secondary villain in the form of Hector Hammond. It's somewhat similar to Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer giving us Dr. Doom as a secondary villain to Galactus, or in the case of Doctor Strange, they gave us Mads Mikkelsen's character as a secondary villain to Dormammu. Anyway, as mentioned earlier, Hector's character arc goes nowhere. They tried to link him indirectly with Hal to give them a reason to interact, but we as the audience don't buy it. The only reason he's in Hal's life is because he happens to be the son of someone who happens to work in the same company as Hal. And this reminds me of that Spaceballs joke, "I am your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate." So what does that make us? Absolutely nothing. Reason 3. Parallax and Hector suck. You've probably heard the saying, a hero is only as good as their villain. It's cliché, but the reason it sticks is because it's true. Part of the hero's journey is the struggle, and the struggle comes from an opposing force, an antagonist who has directly conflicting goals with the main character. Without a strong antagonist, the hero has no challenge to overcome, and thus an incomplete and unsatisfying journey. Just think of how boring Rocky IV would be if Rocky scored a first-round knockout with Drago. We've already seen how an impersonal force like Parallax makes for a weak villain. But let's take a look at Hector Hammond, who pretty much becomes Megamind in the film. He's more annoying than threatening with his constant screams, and his motivation is that he's just jealous of Hal's relationship with Carol, and at the end, he just gets absorbed by Parallax with no resolution. What a waste of screen time. And by the way, Parallax is too big a threat to be defeated in the first movie. He's meant to be an endgame final boss type character. Hal defeating Parallax in just the first film is like Iron Man defeating Thanos in his first movie. Sinestro would have been a great villain to explore instead. He's a complex character but can be summed up in 2 words, power corrupts. Instead of focusing on Hector and Parallax, they could have created a complete character arc for him, showing his turning to evil and Hal having to stop his mentor. Reason 4. Too much time on Earth. For a superhero based in space, this movie spent too much time on Earth. Which is a shame, as the scenes on the planet Oa were some of the best portions of the movie. Here was DC's chance to immerse their audiences in a new world, but unfortunately, it looks like their budget didn't allow for it. Reason 5. Pacing issues. The film is almost 2 hours long, but overall, nothing much happens, largely due to the studio choosing to get sidetracked on other plot lines that don't really matter. It's not until 70 minutes into the movie that Hal uses his ring to save people in the helicopter crash scene. In contrast, Green Lantern First Flight, a 77-minute animated movie, had a better storyline, better villain, and ending, all within a condensed time frame. Every minute was well crafted to serve the overall purpose of the plot, and most of it happens in space, too. Overall, it's definitely safe to say that Green Lantern was underwhelming. But it's not all that bad, at least not as bad as its reputation might lead you to believe. It's still passable on the entertainment side, and they did get the tone of the film on point. I appreciate the fact that this was more of a lighthearted comedy, which is a faithful adaptation of the character, instead of a dark, brooding feel that belongs in a Batman movie. The casting here is solid, too. Although fans might want to have Nathan Fillion wearing the ring, Ryan Reynolds was a good fit for Hal Jordan's personality. But the best casting was, hands down, Mark Strong as Sinestro, and it's a shame we won't get to see him fully evil with the yellow ring. Oh, and look, we have Taika Waititi in this movie as well, who would go on to direct Thor Ragnarok and, in the words of Ryan Reynolds, become a national treasure. So what do you think? Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out some of our other videos as well.